Bartholomew Mosse realised very quickly, after a couple of years, that he needed to fulfil his vision to build a purpose-built maternity hospital. So over a 12-year period, Mosse fulfilled that vision. So from 1745, when the first Rotunda Hospital, the Rotunda Lying-in Hospital on the south side started, through to 1757, when we moved to our current site, he was running lotteries, he was running musicals, he was looking for support from well-connected, well-off people who had charitable intention. He was travelling to London whenever he had the opportunity to garner more financial support for his vision. And all the while he was delivering babies and doing his best to keep the show on the road. So a hugely busy man. Meanwhile, married life, he settled down with his second wife, and they had 2 children, Charles and Jane, and thankfully they survived. But Mosse was clearly full of energy, incredibly motivated. He befriended Richard Castles, who was the leading architect of the day. He was German-born, but grew up in Ireland, and he would have designed all of the main Palladian mansions around the country. Places like Powerscourt House, Carton House, Markievicz House in Sligo, and in fact Leinster House, which initially was the Duke of Leinster's home and then went on to become the seat of Parliament. And Castles and Mosse became very good friends, and they were known to have had a lot of meetings late at night, and the term at the time that they were slaves to Bacchus means that they would have consumed a reasonable amount of wine or brandy, but would have plotted and planned. And the really nice part of this is that Richard Castles did the work pro bono and said, yes, I will design the rotunda for you, I will design the new lying-in hospital. And in doing so, he cleverly took the plans, the blueprint plans for Leinster House, and flipped them completely round. So smart people walking up Kildare Street, looking in at, or Dawson Street, will look in at Leinster House, and they look here at Rotunda. They're identical, with a few modifications here and there. But essentially, the internal part, the rooms are the same. Again, modifications over the years for various reasons. But that was Castle's contribution, and a very fine one too. So the building is of the typical Palladian style. And the lotteries were intriguing because over the course of 5, 6, 7 years, he had 5 lotteries which raised £11,000. Now £11,000 is a lot of money at that time. In order to gain the money to build the hospital was about £20,000. He bought this site on the north side. 4 acres and 1 rood was the actual size, the footprint, and that was outside the city walls, and he initially leased it and then subsequently bought it. But in order to get money in before the building itself, before Castles and the team could do that, he had a designer called Richard Stevenson design gardens. They were known as the Pleasure Gardens, and that cost about £2,000, and they were modelled on the Vauxhall Gardens in London. And they were absolutely magnificent gardens that took up the full 4 acres. He charged 1 shilling for people to come in, and that entitled them to walk around the promenade, to attend music recitals which were held regularly. And there was a famous event called the Sunday Promenade, where people would come in on Sunday evenings and listen to orchestras playing. So it was hugely popular, and later on he opened it up to everybody, where just a penny was paid to come in. So the general public, who didn't have as much money, were able to come in and use the facilities and see the place. So that happened over a number of years, and that was another avenue and source for money. The lotteries were very interesting and very successful, but unfortunately Mosse fell on a sword with the lotteries, because on the 5th lottery he hadn't sold all of the tickets, and we don't quite know the full circumstances, but speculation has been that the hospital, or Mosse, bought some of the unsold tickets, and when the draw was done, the speculation is that perhaps the prize money went to the hospital. So when Mosse was on a trip to London to look for more funding, He was arrested in Holyhead by the Crown Police and put into Beaumaris Castle, a beautiful castle just on the edge of the coast beside Holyhead. And he was held captive there for some time. Ever resourceful, he managed to escape through, not quite sure how he did, but he managed to escape and swam over to the Highlands and got a boat back to Dublin. On his return, he published a set of accounts which completely cleared his name, and he was completely exonerated, but a clearly very stressful time because it had implications for the new lying-in hospital, it had implications for Mosse himself and for all the good work that he had done, but he did publish the accounts. Around that time, he also knew that he had to get a royal charter, and by getting a royal charter for the hospital, this essentially would mean that the hospital would become a national institution. And by becoming a national institution, the British government at the time, because we were part of the British Isles, would have to give a certain quantum of money each year to run the hospital. And that was achieved and received in 1757. And that was a massive boost to Mosse. He didn't have to do as much of the fundraising as he had done before. And there is a royal charter here in the hospital. It's held in a case and it's available for people to come and see if they wish. But a hugely important milestone in our history. So that was 1756, and then the hospital opened on the 8th of December in 1757. And the women and babies who were over on the south side in the first lying-in hospital were all transported over and came through the front door. Same front door then, same front door now. And we've delivered probably somewhere close to 1 million babies since then. So the 8th of December is an important date in the calendar of Irish people because of Feast of I think it's the Assumption, also known as a man from Mayo, a Culchie. It's known as Culchie Day, and lots of people would come to Dublin on the 8th of December. But the 8th of December is a great day in the Rotunda calendar. So following that, in that first 12 years, there would have been about 4,000 mothers and babies delivered, by and large, very safely for the vast majority. Another fascinating aspect of that 12 years, and it's not written anywhere directly, but undoubtedly the effect of having the Rotunda in Dublin, looking after the poorest part of society, is that he cared for people who might have taken a different road. And we know from the city records that the infanticide rates dropped over that 10, 15, 20-year period. And so who knows, is it an effect of the Rotunda and Bartholomew Mosse's vision? But I think it is. And I think we have to remember that at that time, people who worked in Ireland, lived in Ireland, there was no contraception, they're huge families. Many workers were not paid in money, but they were paid in beer. And so lots of families were unable to care for their babies, and babies were put up for adoption, for fostering, and in some cases they were abandoned. And that whole story of the abandoned baby is something that's connected to the Rotunda story. It was prevalent in London, it was prevalent in Dublin, it was prevalent in all the main big towns and cities in the British Isles at the time. And George Frederick Handel is an interesting character who's connected to Mosse and connected to the Rotunda story. He was the chief patron. He lived in London. He was the chief patron for the Foundling Hospital, which is near Kensington Gardens. It's still available for you to go and visit today, and it's an extraordinary and fascinating place. But the story of the Foundling also is connected to the Rotunda, in that here in the chapel we have the Gresham window, and we have the Gresham grasshopper, and an ancestor of Thomas Gresham, a man called Roger de Gresham, was known to have been a foundling, and he went on to have his own family, and Thomas Gresham would have been a descendant. Thomas de Gresham was the founder of the Royal Exchange, the financial exchange in London in the 1500s, and that clearly made a massive difference to London. It now became a global centre for finance, and it totally changed the way that London was viewed. It went from strength to strength and is now obviously the Royal Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange. But the original guy was a foundling, and the family, in response to that, because the story goes that the father was out on his horse and heard a grasshopper and followed the grasshopper, but in fact the noise that he thought was a grasshopper was a baby that was left abandoned by a tree. Took the baby in, and the rest is history. And another foundling, a second Thomas de Gresham, was left on the steps of the Royal Stock Exchange, and he was brought into the Gresham family. Now he went on to grow up to be a young man, and at the age of 21 he came to Dublin. And he worked as a butler here for one of the leading families on Parnell Square, or Rutland Square as it was known at the time. He did very well. He made good money and he started to invest, and then he bought some buildings here on Sackville Street, which is now O'Connell Street, and those buildings he turned into the Gresham Hotel. And because of the family history, because of the connection to the Rotunda and the whole baby story, Thomas de Gresham approached the hospital and donated these windows. The original windows were plain glass, as per the Georgian architecture at the time. So they're a bit of an anachronism or an anomaly, and the Georgian society don't particularly like the fact that we have stained glass windows here. But you will see, if you look up, you will see in the top panel a circular area, and then the Gresham coat of arms on top of it is the grasshopper. So I think it's a lovely little connection between Handel, the Greshams and the Rotunda.